Welcome to the Adventure Travel Show podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and today we're going to look at a really crucial part of our camping gear, and that's our whole sleep system. And by sleep system, I mean our sleeping bag or quilt, our sleep liner, our sleeping pad, any accessories that we might need to make our quote-unquote bed. So we're going to look at what our different options are there as far as the bells and whistles and features, and so that you only buy the features that you actually need for the purposes of your outdoor experiences. Equipment can be expensive, so we don't want to make any financial mistakes there. And we want to make sure that you get the right sleeping gear for your particular needs. We are also going to learn how to maintain and store our equipment. You want it to last as long as possible and also to be ready for you and not be all nasty when you're ready to use it the next time. Interested? Then let's get started. After a fun but often hard day outdoors, it's nice to get a good night's sleep. There's much more to a good night's rest than just your sleeping bag. I like to think of this as your total camping sleep system. And like I said, this is going to be your sleeping bag or your quilt, a sleeping bag liner, and your sleeping pad, plus any of the accessories that you're going to need. And the combination of all these items is going to determine how comfortable you're going to be at night. But like I always say though, for backpackers, it's comfort during the day versus comfort at night. So the less weight you have during the day, the less comfortable you're going to be at night. The more stuff you carry during the day, that's going to translate into more comfort when you're resting at camp. So your job is to find the happy mix between comfort during the day and comfort at night that best suits your personal needs. So we're going to learn about the various features that can reduce your pack weight and improve comfort. And as always, you can buy reduction in weight by choosing higher tech products, which are often a lot more expensive. But we don't want to waste any money. So what I'm hoping to do in this episode is to give you the confidence to purchase the sleep system that's right for you for the least amount of your hard-earned dollars. And while weight and bulk aren't necessarily considerations for car campers, we're going to address car camper needs too, because let's face it, car camping is fun, and we want to know what our options are there as well. So to begin with, let's start with the first item of our sleeping system, and that is the sleeping bag. Before you buy a sleeping bag or sleeping quilt, you're going to need to ask yourself several questions about where, when, and how you're going to be using your sleeping bag. The first question we want to think about is how are we actually going to be using our sleeping bag? And we need to know what's the difference between a camping sleeping bag and a backpacking sleeping bag. And the big answer is bulk and weight. If you're car camping, you don't really care how much your sleeping bag weighs or whether it fits in your backpack. But you sure will if you're carrying your sleeping bag on your back. And if you do both activities, car camping and backpacking, and can only afford to buy one sleeping bag, then you're better off choosing a lightweight sleeping bag so that you can also use it backpacking. The next question you need to ask yourself is, when are you going to be using your sleeping bag? Because sleeping bags have different thermal ratings, and you'll also see them listed as season ratings. So like a 3-season sleeping bag is comfortable for use during most spring through fall temperatures. A 4-season bag is much, much warmer and it's good for sub-freezing temps. You'll see temperature ratings broken out by degrees, like 40 plus degrees. That would be like a summer weight only sleeping bag. Or 15 to 39 degrees, and these are in Fahrenheit, by the way. Or 1 to 14 degrees. Now you're starting to get really cold. And then from 0 down to negative 50, which I don't cover that kind of extreme weather thing, so you'll have to go elsewhere for information on that kind of gear. But these are the different temperature ranges that you'll find in the sleeping bag manufacturing world. Things you want to think about when choosing it too is remember you can unzip and flip off the top of your sleeping bag if you get too hot, but you can't add a layer if you get too cold. So you want to choose a bag, and actually your whole system, because we're looking at this as a symbiotic grouping. So you want to choose a system in a bag that is rated for the coldest that you expect to sleep in, and err on the side of the cold side, because there's nothing worse than being super freezing while you're out camping. If you just camp in the summer, you're going to be fine with a bag rated for 30 degrees or warmer in most parts of the world. Another question you want to ask yourself is, where do you plan on camping? So you consider the temperatures that you might encounter. I live on the coast in the south of the United States. If I just want to camp at the beach in the summertime, the lightest rated bag is going to be fine. But if I decide I'm heading over to the Blue Ridge Mountains, even in the summertime, I'm going to want a warmer bag. So anytime you're camping at higher elevations, camping further north on the latitude lines, and into the cusp seasons of fall and spring, you want to consider a bag that'll get you down somewhere between 15 and 30 degrees. And you'll use these temperature ratings to compare the different bags as you're shopping. So your actual overall comfort is going to depend on all of your choices that you make in your whole sleep system package. So it's going to also include things like your sleeping pad and your liner. And we'll cover all that in just a little bit. Another question you need to ask yourself is, how do you sleep? Are you somebody that tosses and turns? If so, you're going to probably prefer a rectangular sleeping bag, most of which open fully and can work a little bit like a comforter if need be. But the rectangular ones allow your feet and your body to twist and turn a little bit more than the mummy-sized ones that actually look like a sarcophagus out of Egypt. They're nice and snug. They don't take up as much room. They're nice and warm, but you can't really move very well in them. If you'd like to sleep with your partner, you might want to use a double sleeping bag. And it's also possible to buy 2 sleeping bags that zip together. This can give you the best of both worlds for a couple that sometimes travels together, sometimes camps together, and sometimes does not, because when you're camping together, you can zip them together, but if you're camping solo, you don't need to bring the extra weight of a double sleeping bag. The key thing here, though, is not all sleeping bags do zip together. They generally have to be of the same make and model, although sometimes you could find one of the same make that's a right zip bag that matches up with the left zip bag. But anyway, before you buy any sleeping bags that you hope to zip together, ask and make sure before you make the purchase. So we've decided what kind of thermal rating we need. We've decided what kind of shape we need. And now let's look at the best sleeping bag materials. Here, it's basically a choice between synthetic materials and down. So what are the differences between a down and a synthetic sleeping bag? Let's look at some of the pros and cons of the 2 different materials. Insulation value. When choosing between down and synthetic insulation, remember that down insulates much better than synthetic materials, at least as of today. But if down gets wet, it doesn't insulate well at all. However, synthetic fill, if it happens to get damp, it will keep you warm even if it's damp. And down, if it gets wet, takes forever to dry. However, some down fill comes pre-treated to resist water absorption, so you want to make sure that you're looking for that feature if you're buying down. I chose down for my own sleeping bag. It's nice, warm, and fluffy, and very lightweight. Which brings us to the next thing. What's the difference between down and synthetic sleeping bags in regards to weight and bulk? Down weighs much less than synthetic materials for comparable insulation. So if you want to save on weight and space in your backpack, you're going to want to choose down. Down also compresses much tighter in a compression sack. Even after being compressed as much as it does when you're backpacking, it's going to retain its loft much longer. And that loft is what gives us those little air pockets. That's what's holding in the air and actually acting as the insulator for us. So if you're trying to find the lightest weight, less bulky material, i.e. backpackers or ultralight backpackers, you're going to want to go with down. Looking as a measure between cost and value, down's going to cost more than the synthetics, but it's going to last much longer if properly maintained because it will retain its loft much longer. But you're going to pay more up front, you'll just get more years out of it, particularly if you take good care of it. So while down is often the best choice for most people, for personal or health reasons, synthetic might be the way for you to go. Down mainly comes from domestic geese. About 70% of it's coming out of China these days, and the geese are being killed for meat, which may be an issue for some people. You want to look whether or not the down you're buying is ethical down, which you can do by checking whether the manufacturer you're considering honors RDS, Responsible Down Standards, or TDS, Global Traceable Down Standards, because there's some bad players out there, but most responsible merchants are going to try to source ethical down, but it's a good idea to check just to be on the safe side. If you have any allergies, down may not be an option for you. If it's going to make you sneeze, it might trigger some allergies in you. And synthetic fill is non-allergenic, so that might sway you to that choice. I do want to mention too, the synthetic materials are really improving each year. So if it's been a few years since you purchased a synthetic sleeping bag, you might want to consider upgrading to a newer model, even if it's a new to you newer model. Because sometimes you can buy some really nice used equipment that's only a year or two old from the gearheads that have to buy something new every year, whatever the latest and greatest is. So it might be a year old to the seller, but it might be 4 years of improved technology to you. Another thing to look at is some of the extra little features, like the zipper. If the zipper's got 2 little zipper accesses, the little toggle things, that gives you 2 ways to adjust your temperature control. Nice feature. You also want to, looking at that zipper, you want to see how does that manufacturer protect that zipper from snagging? Is there some kind of a zipper cover or some kind of a shield so it doesn't get caught? And just pay a little bit of attention to the outer fabric of the sleeping bag. It's usually made from some kind of a nylon or polyester, and it's going to have some durable water repellent feature that's going to help keep whatever that fill is from getting damp. You might see some snazzy little features like a little small pocket that you can store things like your hand sanitizer or chapstick or a watch inside. But like my tent's got a little stash pocket, so that feature would mean nothing to me. But if your tent doesn't, you might find that a handy little feature and something to look for. Some accessories you need to consider for your sleeping bag. One is a compression sack. This is important to the backpackers, not so much for the car campers unless they're tight on space as well. But if you ever use your sleeping bag for backpacking, you're going to want to buy a waterproof compression sack. That's going to reduce the bulk of your sleeping bag. These bags literally suck out all the air, reducing your bag to just a fraction of its original size. This is going to make it so much easier to fit in your backpack. And I want to refer you to episode number 4 of the Adventure Travel Show podcast, where I teach you how to fit and pack your backpack, and that'll show you where you're supposed to be putting your sleeping bag in your pack. In addition to your compression sack, you're going to also want some kind of a storage bag. These are going to be generally out of a mesh or a cotton, because you don't want to store your sleeping bag in your compression bag or you're going to reduce its life. Most sleeping bags are going to come with some kind of a storage bag, or else you can just buy one. Or do what I do. I personally drape my sleeping bag after it's completely dry over a heavy-duty wooden hanger, so that allows it plenty of room in my closet to breathe. It also helps keep its loft. That's the main reason you don't want to squish your sleeping bag in that compression sack, because it's going to reduce the loft over time, particularly with the synthetics. Here's a really important thing that you should buy in addition to the sleeping bag, and that is a sleeping bag liner. And the reason it's smart is because sleeping bags are a pain to clean. And if you use a sleeping bag liner, when you get home, you can just toss that in the wash. It'll help keep your sleeping bag so much more cleaner and sanitary. And in addition to that, depending on which one you choose, you could add a whole bunch of warmth to your sleep system. As much as 15 degrees, even when some manufacturer claims 25 degrees. That's huge. I didn't even buy mine. I sewed mine. I got a couple yards of raw silk, and I chose silk because it's light, it's warm, it's durable. And what I did is I just had this big rectangle. I folded it in half, and I sewed the bottom together where my feet go, and then I went up to the side about to my knees. So it made a pocket with a huge opening. That way I could flip it off like a sheet if I want to, but my feet would stay nice and warm inside my little sleep sack. Silk can often be the most expensive fabric choice, but it is probably, in my mind, one of the better choices because of its durability, and it does breathe, and you won't overheat in silk, but it still provides great warmth when it needs it, and it's lightweight. And like I said, I could just toss my silk liner in the regular wash. You got to read the instructions and read the label on the ones that you're considering, but mine, I just pre-wash the fabric and then good to go. Very simple, and that was a very inexpensive option for me. You can also use cotton. It's heavier, so backpackers beware on cotton. It's heavier, but it's cheap, it's durable, and for car campers, a great option, provided you don't let it get wet. Because if it gets wet and it's raining outside, you can't hang it out to dry, it's going to take a long time to dry. Another option for sleeping bag liners is to use a synthetic polyester. And some of these high-tech fabrics can be moisture wicking, plus they're quick drying. You can even buy an insulated sleeping liner that uses a special fiber that helps it dry twice as fast as cotton. These could be expensive, but some of them are claiming up to 25 degrees Fahrenheit additional warmth. Halfway of the warmth at about 12 degrees extra warmth is using a fleece liner. These are super nice and soft and comfy, and they wick moisture, and they're quick drying, but depending on the weight of the fleece, they can be bulky. So they're great for car campers, maybe not so good for a backpacker. Another cool feature that you can look for in sleep liners if you're camping out in real deep backwoods, some manufactured sleeping bag liners can offer features like a built-in bug repellent. So these are going to repel mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, flies, and they could be made specifically to your sleeping bag shape. So if you get a mummy bag, you get a mummy bag sleeping liner. But if you get a sleeping bag liner for the mummy, make sure you get one with a 3D foot box. That way your feet can move around a little bit better and you don't feel like your feet are trapped and claustrophobic. Some liners even have a draw cord hood to help keep you warm. Look for a nice lightweight stuff sack if you plan on keeping your liner in your backpack when you're camping. And here's one of my favorite parts of the sleep system, and that is the sleeping pad. And here's where our car campers can shine in comfort. There are two ways that sleeping pads derive their comfort. They're either using air or closed cell foam padding. For the air pads, you can get a pad that either blow up yourself or you can use an inflator or a pump of some kind. There are even self-inflating sleeping pads these days. There's 3 things you want to consider before you buy your sleeping pad. Number 1, the intended use. So like the sleeping bag, if you're car camping, it doesn't really make a difference about the weight or the size. And here you want to try to get the most comfort you can for your dollars. But if you're backpacking, weight and bulk matters. For a car camping sleeping pad, you're going to find air pads far more comfortable than the closed-celled padding. And since you got the space, I say go big or go home. Choose either the self-inflating or get one that you can blow up with a pump. If temperatures are mild, you can even use one of those standard size blow-up spare mattresses that uses conventional sheets and blankets and blow it up with a 12-volt car pump. But remember, those mattresses don't have any insulation at all, so keep that in mind. So if you're car camping, you don't need to worry about bulk, so just get a nice thick one for your comfort. However, if you're backpacking or through hiking, you need a different kind of sleeping pad. You're going to have to pay attention to the space and the weight. You can still get an air pad, but it's going to be a lot thinner and a lot smaller than the car camper's choice. And it's even more important here to pay attention to the size of the actual pad itself and what kind of insulation it's going to be able to offer you. The higher the performance and the less the weight, of course, is going to be more expensive. But I personally believe this is an area that you want to spend your money. And the whole sleep system, I think, is an important place to spend your money because you're going to be so tired after hiking all day that you want to get the best sleep possible. Even if you can't buy it all at once, budget it, plan it out, wait for the sales, buy good quality used gear, but get yourself a good sleep system. Now, if you're bikepacking or kayak or canoe touring and you've got the space, you can still go with the air sleeping pad and go up a little bit more in the comfort than you can if you're backpacking. So there, your space is going to be a little bit of a constraint. The weight won't be quite the issue as it is if you're carrying it on your back. One way is that you can save some of that weight and some of the cost is by buying a pad that just comforts your torso. Okay, the legs might be dangling off the pad a little bit. That's actually what I do. I like an ultralight backpacking sleeping pad, and there's lots of them out there right now. My personal one is that I use a Thermarest currently, and it makes this horrible crinkly noise when I turn over. So I have to wear earplugs, which I kind of do anyway because I'm so sensitive to sleeping issues these days. But it's an obnoxious noise, but that little crinkly is part of the insulation in the bottom part of it. So that's one of the technological features that they're able to give me a lot of comfort pad-wise for a lot less weight. So it's a trade-off. Everything is always going to be a trade-off, guys. One other thing I like about my mattress, though, I can blow it up in like a minute or so. And it does keep my body up off the ground and gives me a reasonable comfort. The manufacturers recommend because as the temperatures drop during the night, the air compresses a little bit. So you'll feel like your mattress might have lost air while you're sleeping. So to compensate for that, you either blow it up right before you go to bed or just give it a little extra juice right before you go to bed. So that way it's nice and thick when you lie down and so it won't feel like it's sinking so much on you. And should you tear your air pad, you can patch it. The tears are normally coming from dog's claws, but sometimes you'll have a rock or a stick or something that can pierce your shell. You want to keep a small repair patch in your emergency kit, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes of what should be in your emergency kit. But before you even go out in the woods or whatever, make sure you read and understand how to patch your particular pad before you go camping. You do not want to be trying to figure this out in the middle of the night and find out, oh, I don't know how to do it, or I don't have the instructions, and I have no internet, I don't know what to do. Mostly it's just a simple patch, but know what you should be doing and make sure that you have the gear to repair that if you're going to be out for multiple days. I know ultralight backpackers want to minimize weight at all costs, and sometimes including comfort, and they have another choice that I wouldn't recommend for anybody but the most hardcore, and that is the lightest weight sleeping pad, which is the closed cell foam pad. One of the other benefits of this pad is usually it is waterproof and you can roll it up and store it under your backpack using those two little straps on the bottom. So that gives you a little bit more room in your pack. These are super lightweight foam pads and they're very durable because they can't pop. And that's also a consideration for long distance backpackers, through hikers. It's one less thing to worry about. Your pad is not going to fail you. You can even, to reduce the weight even more, buy a 3/4 closed cell foam pad. So again, it's just covering your main torso and your legs are off the side. And frankly, when I'm camping, I'm elevating my feet on my backpack anyway. So it doesn't really make a difference that my legs aren't on pad. I did try the closed cell foam pad. It was not comfortable enough for me. So I traded that in and got the air pad, but an ultralight one. So I'm not at huge comfort. I'm at tolerable comfort because that's my trade-off. I'd rather have the comfort during the day and some comfort at night versus extreme one way or the other. So when you're looking for your sleeping pad, some of the features you want to pay attention to is number one, and this is a really important one, and that is the insulation and the R value. Each manufacturer is going to list the insulating capabilities of their sleeping bags and of their sleeping pads in an R value. These values are going to range from 1, which means it's not insulating you at all, you might as well be on the dirt, up to 11 for extreme cold situations. People who feel the cold, even when they're camping in modest temperatures, are usually going to be happy with around a 4 rating. You can even buy a women-specific air pad that are more insulated by the feet and the core areas. That's where we women lose our heat the fastest. Personal pad is rated at a 3.2, and I find it fine for my camping needs. And remember, I try not to camp when it's forecast to be below 50. I have camped at the high 30s with this system. Been a little uncomfortable, but I wasn't freezing to death. So in addition to the insulation, the key thing, particularly for backpackers, you want to pay attention to that sleeping pad weight, because even my nice little ultralight one still weighs around a pound. So you want to compare the sleeping pad weight of whatever pad you're considering, and if you're using it for anything other than car camping, weight is going to be a critical consideration. If you want to reduce the sleeping pad weight without reducing the comfort, you can choose a shape that shaves off some of the material, and that would be getting a tapered or a mummy shape versus a rectangle, because our bodies do taper down as they get to the feet. You could get the 3/4 length pad like I did. There is no foot coverage. And if you're sleeping with a partner, you might be able to shave some ounces by using a 2-person pad versus 2 one-people pads. Like I said, the lightest weight sleeping pad is the closed cell pad. Go ahead and go full in. If you're ultralight, good torso leg closed cell pad, and you're going to be the lightest possible, but you're not going to be very comfortable. Or at least according to my bones and my bum. Other considerations of your sleeping pad is the length and the width. What are the dimensions? A regular pad is about 6 feet long. So if you're shorter than 6 feet by any length, you might want to try to find a smaller length, maybe get a short or 3/4 length that's going to come in around 4 feet. And your leg's going to be off a little bit, but that should be okay. However, if you're taller, you're going to have to get a long that usually runs about 6.5 feet. The key is for backpackers, bike packers, is to try to get the shortest and lightest pad that you can comfortably get away with. Most sleeping pads are about 20 inches wide. Larger people, or those that roll around a lot, may opt for a wider 25 to 30 inch width, and some of those have baffles. I'll talk about that in a minute. You want to make sure that your pad works with your tent. Don't forget about that. And also don't forget, if you're tenting with a partner, you got to pay attention to the dimensions of both partners' pads. You want to compare lengths on the wider models and make sure that you're matching up the best combination of length and width that fits your body with no excess material as much as possible. And remember, you don't have to be scribbling down a whole bunch of notes on this. I got your back here. If you get on my once a month newsletter, I will be sending you a buyer's guide at the beginning of the month. So you'll get a nice compact buyer's guide that'll help you when you're making your buying decisions. And don't worry, it's free. If you can't wait, don't forget you can always go to the Adventure Travel Show podcast /sleep, or just put in sleeping bag in the search bar and this episode will pull up, and then you can also see it there and download it right away if you need it sooner. So we've talked about sleeping pad features. Now let's talk a little bit about construction, some of the considerations that you need to pay attention to there. So remember I mentioned baffles earlier. So if you're somebody that rolls around a lot, you can actually buy a pad that has little baffle, like little bumpers on the edges a little bit. That'll help keep you on the pad. And if you've got kids, this is also a really nice feature for them as well. Some pads might have a built-in kind of quote-unquote pillow that gives you a little bit more support there. Me, I just bring my little 6-inch down pillow. That's my luxury item that I bring when I backpack. Doesn't weigh very much, and I just like the pillow over. I used to just stuff my clothes in a stuffed sack. That was a little clunky and uncomfortable, so my little pillow works for me. You want to try to find a sleeping pad that has something on the top that helps grip you to that pad. Mine, I slip off a little bit, and you're going to find that on a lot of them. But some of them will have a little bit of texture on top that'll kind of, like I said, add like a little bit of a gripper so you don't spend half the night half on the pad, half off. You can also even buy a sleeping bag that has a sleeve to hold your pad. And this is great, but you just got to make sure that you check the sleeping bag specs of that little pocket before you buy your pad to make sure that your new pad fits. I like that I can blow up my little air mattress in about a minute or so. But if you want, you can actually buy a pad that comes with an integrated hand pump, or on some models, you can buy a separate bag-style hand pump. But remember, each feature that you're adding adds weight. If you have to bring an extra accessory, that adds weight. So depending on whether you're car camping or backpacking, all these little factors make a difference. And remember, if you're backpacking, ounces matter. You want to add up the weight of every single thing that you're bringing. I'll put a link to my backpacker's checklist also in the show notes as well, because you don't want to bring anything you don't need. Here's something I want you to do too before you go camping at all. When you bring your new pad home, I want you to blow it up or set it up as if you're going to actually be camping, and then listen to your pad before you actually go camping. Like mine is very noisy. Whatever that insulating barrier is on the bottom, it crinkles. So if yours makes noises that annoy you, you're going to have to bring earplugs or switch out for a different pad. So be sure to test it out at home before you test it out in the wild. That's actually good advice for any new equipment. You want to test it and make sure you know how to use it before you go and use it on an adventure. Deciding which camp sleeping system is best for you and what you should be buying is a very personal decision, and it depends on both your personal needs as well as what activities that you're going to be doing. But I believe if you answer the questions that we've covered above and look at the different features and construction and the different products that are available, you're going to be able to determine your very best sleeping system. So you've invested all this time and money in choosing the right camping sleeping system for you. Now let's make sure that it lasts. Let's learn how to maintain it. To begin with, let's look at how to clean our sleeping bag or quilt. But first, I hope that you're using a sleeping bag liner, because that's going to make your sleeping bag stay cleaner than it would if you're just going into it only somewhat cleaned up at the end of the day. So again, I recommend getting the sleeping bag liner because that will help in all sorts of ways, both in the cleaning and in the length of time that you'll be able to use your sleeping bag. You want to avoid doing a full cleaning of your sleeping bag unless it's absolutely necessary, because cleaning will add some stress to the seams and a little bit extra wear to the product. So if at all possible, you want to try to spot clean your sleeping bag first. And often the dirty part is up by your neck where some of the oils and all that get into it. So see a spot cleaning first. And so to do a spot cleaning, First of all, use only the recommended cleaning agent. And if you don't know, if you cut out your labels or something like that, go online and see what they're recommending that you use. And then you want to pull the liner away from the inside filler. So you're just cleaning the cover. So using that recommended cleaning agent, you're going to gently scrub the dirty area using an old toothbrush. And then quote unquote rinse it by using a wet sponge and keep blotting it and cleaning it out until that soapy residue is removed. And the most important thing is let it dry absolutely completely before storing it. And I'll get into how to dry it when we do the full clean, which is next. If you are an avid camper and you're using your sleeping bag all the time, it is probably a good idea to at least give it a full cleaning once a year. So if you do, so let's say we're going to be doing an annual wash. All right. This can actually help improve its loft because you're going to be breaking up some of the body oils that can drag down the interior fill. But again, always make sure that you're reading the instructions that came with your bag and find them online if you've lost them. And although you can wash it in a bathtub, I really wouldn't recommend it. It's a real pain and it's heavy and it's hard. So I would recommend, if you don't want to pay a commercial service to take care of it for you, find a laundromat that has commercially sized, front-loaded only. Never put your sleeping bag, never try to wash your sleeping bag in a top-loaded washer that has one of those agitators because that's too hard on the bag. Also, a no-no. You can't dry clean a sleeping bag. So when I say a commercial washer, you're taking it to a commercial washing service, not a dry cleaner. The chemicals that they use in dry cleaning are way too harsh for your sleeping bag. And when washing it, don't think you're helping things and sanitizing things by using bleach or any bleach alternatives or fabric softeners. Keep it really simple and only use the agent that they recommend that you clean the bag with. Before you start washing it, you want to loosen any drawstrings before inserting it into the washing machine. That's going to help minimize any clumping of the fill. You also want to fasten any closures. That'll help keep things from pulling and getting warped and such like that. When you're taking your bag out of the washing machine, it's still going to have a lot of water in it, even though it's been drained. You don't want to pull it all out like you're tugging out on it. You've got to kind of get your arms in there and gently lift it out as much as possible, all in one piece. And that will help keep your seams intact. And it'll be just more gentle on your bag. And then get a whole bunch of dry towels and then lay them on the floor. Put your sleeping bag on top, dry towels on top of that. You've now made a sleeping bag sandwich, which you're going to roll up and try to press down and extract as much water as possible. Once you've gotten as dry as you can there, now it's time to hang it up to dry. And drying is going to take a long time. Okay, so if you are at the commercial laundromat, you're going to place your freshly washed bag that's been drained of as much water as possible in the commercial dryer on low heat only. Don't think you're going to save a bunch of quarters by putting it on high heat. That's going to hurt your bag. It's got to be dried on low heat only. I don't care if you're down or synthetic. So low heat in the dryer. And remember, a down bag takes forever to dry. This could take a couple hours to dry. You can toss in several new tennis balls to help speed things up a little bit and to break up some of the wet down clumps. If you've got a synthetic bag, that's going to take considerably less time. But it's still going to take about an hour or so. And the most important thing, make sure that your sleeping bag is completely dry before storing it. All right, so how do you store a sleeping bag? Whenever you return from a camping trip, make sure you're inspecting and cleaning all of your gear as necessary to ensure a long life. You don't want to be getting ready for the big weekend only to find that your sleeping bag is all mildewed and your tent's moldy, right? Now that you've learned how to clean your sleeping bag, let's figure out how to store it. Like I said, you want to make sure it is completely dry before you store it so you don't get any unpleasant surprises. So to do so, when you get back, let's say it's not wet, but your body heat and perspiration and just humidity could be in the bag. So you want to find a covered area to try to dry out your gear. And this applies to all your gear, not just your sleeping bag. And it can't be in the sunlight because sunlight can hurt the fabric a little bit. So you want to get it out of the sun. If you've got a covered porch or a garage, that's a great place to hang it out. And I leave mine out for at least a day. You would not believe my porch when I get home from a trip. But I've got lines everywhere and things are draped over tables and chairs and all that. But my gear always looks pretty darn good because I do take really good care of it. So you want to first, with your sleeping bag, turn it inside out and leave it out like that for at least, 4 or 5 hours, and make sure that's dry on that side, and then flip it right side, hang it up that way. If you are able, if you've got a rectangular one that you can completely unzip and open up, you want to hang it so that the whole thing is opened up and exposed to the air. When you flip it, the other half gets exposed. But if you don't have the room, you can do it in quarters instead. But you want to make sure that each section of the sleeping bag is completely exposed to the air so it can completely dry out. And again, that may take 4 or 5 hours for each section. Err on the side of caution. And while the compression sack we talked about earlier is fabulous for getting your sleeping bag to fit into your backpack, you can't store your sleeping bag in there. Even though the loft will come back down more so than synthetic, it's going to hurt the loft of your bag. It can't be squished like that. It's those air pockets between the fill. And that's what's giving us a lot of that insulating quality. We don't want the bag to get compressed and stay compressed. If you do store it in your compression sack, you are going to be reducing the life of your sleeping bag. So, store it instead in a mesh or a cotton sack. Most of the time, your sleeping bag is going to come with a storage sack, but if you can always buy one if not. If you're not sure the size, pick like a 90-liter bag. And remember, you want it to be able to breathe. So you want cotton or mesh or something so the air can flow through it. And I don't actually store mine in a bag. I've got this big heavy-duty wooden hanger that I drape it over. And so it's zipped up and lying folded in half over this hanger. So it takes up a lot of room in the closet, but that closet is my backpacking closet and that's its job. So if you've got the space, I like doing it that way. Otherwise, the storage bag will work fine for you. But where you store it is important. Ideally, you want to choose a temperature-controlled room that has low humidity. So that means don't put it in the attic, don't put it in the basement, avoid the garage whenever possible. It's also not a good idea to keep your sleeping bag in the trunk of your car, just in case, I want to keep my camping gear on hand so I can just spontaneously go and I don't have to worry about packing and unpacking all the time. Sounds great. The heat in the trunk of a car is no good for your equipment, particularly your sleeping bag. It just gets too hot in there. Your camping gear is expensive. So if you take proper care of your gear, it's going to help you get the most life out of it, and it'll cause you the least maintenance headaches. So we talked about the sleeping bag. The liner, you're going to have to follow the directions because it depends on what material you have. But when you get a liner, you want to make sure you get one that's easy to wash. Just check on the dryer settings and heats and just read the instructions on that. There's too many variables for me to do that, but you want to wash that after every use. That's not something you just wait on. So that's something, it should be easy clean, get home, throw it in with your hiking clothes. That's what you want to be looking for there. And on the pad, again, you're going to read the directions. You want all the debris off on my air mattress because when you're breathing in, your breath is full of moisture. So there's a little bit of condensation in there. So I store mine on another heavy-duty hanger. I first open it up and let whatever condensation that's inside the pad hopefully evaporate. And then I just fill it loosely so that it's somewhat inflated, maybe at like 20 to 25%. And then I drape that over a hanger. But if you don't want to do that or you don't have the space to spare, then again, read the directions in case they're giving you contrary advice on this. But you want to let it air out and get that moisture out as much as possible and store it as they recommend. I hope you found today's episode on choosing and maintaining the best sleeping system for you helpful. I would appreciate it if you would show me a little bit of love and share this episode with your outdoor-loving buddies. And don't forget that the Adventure Travel Show podcast has a complete series on teaching you the how-tos of adventure travel, whether that means camping at your local state park or backpacking to Nepal. Be sure to visit the website, adventuretravelshowpodcast.com, or go to the podcast app wherever you're listening to this. You can see the complete directory of all the episodes and everything that we've covered. You can also always reach out to me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. You know I love getting your emails, I like hearing about your adventures, and I love getting show ideas from you. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!